Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us here as we prepare here for our presentation today. Uh, our discussion today is going to be about how early financial choices can shape career flexibility and prevent burnout. Um, so today, what we're really going to do is we're going to talk about how financial decisions that you make early in your career and how that can shape the freedom and flexibility that you'll have later in life. During our presentation, we'll explore how to think about what vehicles to consider when investing. We will talk about how intentional spending can create options for your future. As we all know, as we progress through our lives, we deal with all sorts of events, some that we expect and plan for, but others that come as a surprise, or perhaps better said, we've avoided addressing in hopes that those don't become a big issue for us in our lives. But we can't just hope for the best outcome. We do have to plan for a wide range of possibilities. Proper planning allows us to have a better means to deal with changes. This provides comfort around ideas such as pursuing new opportunities, scaling back work hours, or simply just having more control of our lives. It allows us to be ready for the unforeseen events as well. So during this time today, we'll talk about a few strategies to align our money with our values and build financial resilience and avoid burnout. My name is Yannick Pedersen. I am a wealth advisor at Curi Capital. I work here in the western suburbs of Chicagoland. And with me here today, we have my colleague as well, who will introduce himself.
Hi, this is Patrick Stimson, and I'm also a wealth advisor and a partner based in our Denver, Colorado office. Now that we've shared our content and our topic for today, we wanted to share an outline here of an agenda to guide us through the discussion. First and foremost, we wanted to explore burnout and the financial component that goes into that. We want to define the concept of financial resilience and how we feel that's an important part of a financial plan. We'll look at a couple case studies that help illustrate the different paths that investors can take to get to different outcomes. At Curi Capital, we are very much goals-based, planning-driven advisors. So we always want to start with that plan, and we'll share how we can get that started. And then we'll look to some tools that also support that plan more on a tactical, strategic level, some things that support that.
Excellent. So to start us off here, I'm going to talk a little bit about burnout, right? And the term burnout, what we really describes is the chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed, right? And it's characterized by creating feelings of exhaustion, cynicism, and detachment towards the work that we do for our employer, and reduced professional efficacy, right? These are some of the ways that we kind of characterize burnout. Um, what burnout can do, of course, is, or excuse me, some factors that can lead to burnout include things such as, limited time to complete the tasks that we have to do in our workday, lacking the resources to do our work effectively, concerns over maybe economic conditions or perhaps changes within the company. One that's become even more prevalent here in recent years is concerns over AI adaptation and potential job replacement. So why does this matter so much? Well, burnout is now at a 6-year high here in the United States. 66% of employees, when a survey done here last year, expressed feeling concerns over burnout. It's not just your workload either, right? It's the lack of control that employees feel, that financial stress, and the lack of time to the ability to step away from work. And experiencing burnout can also exacerbate other lingering concerns, such as potential regret around actions maybe not taken. So it's important that we think about burnout as a real issue for employers, And think about ways to manage burnout, right? One of the simplest and best ways to do that is to take the time that's allocated to you to take vacations or step away from work. We recommend spacing that out throughout the year, but truly utilizing the time that is given to you as an employee. And simple things like taking your lunch away from your workplace, from your office. Separate out work and your personal or recreational time and set boundaries, right? So that your work doesn't impose on your family or personal life. Financial flexibility reduces burnout and regret by turning money into our life options, right? It's not just about optimizing spreadsheets. It's about the freedom to actually live and enjoy yourself. I'm going to talk a little bit here too about financial resilience. Financial resilience is essentially your ability to handle money shocks and keep your life stable when things go wrong, like losing a job, facing a large medical bill, or dealing with rising costs, all without falling into long-term financial trouble. So what does it mean to be financially resilient? Well, it allows you to absorb setbacks, right, without lasting debt issues. Adapt to income or economic changes in your life. Handle an unexpected expense without panic, right? Think larger ticket items and make life choices, right, that will better your future, whether that's shifting your career, providing for a family member, right, taking a step back to avoid burnout, all without creating some sort of financial calamity in your future. Money really is a tool for freedom and flexibility. It's not just about accumulating the wealth towards our end goal. It's also about making sure it gives us flexibility to make the proper life choices that will make us comfortable and successful. So we think about this in terms of how do you really get started here, right? Or what are the key steps to building financial resiliency? Well, number one would be to start early. And I recognize that, that may not always be the case for everyone, but there's never a bad time to start planning and saving towards this. But the earlier you can start, the better. Um, Build up an emergency fund first and foremost, right? That is a key piece of making sure that you can bounce back from any type of setback. And build after-tax investments around your long-term retirement savings too. Just funneling money into a retirement plan is a great approach for your ultimate retirement goal, but you need to have access to funds that come with less of a tax burden for those, mid-life or later career financial needs that could arise. And have a line of credit accessible. Not saying that you need to use it, but it's a good fallback should you need to borrow for a brief period of time at a relatively quick time period. And have access to liquid cash, right? Money markets, savings accounts, things that you can get access to relatively quickly that wouldn't afford you large tax burden or potential market risk as in terms of timing.
Okay, we wanted to share a couple of case studies here. So first, we'll start with the theme of starting early. Here you'll see four different investors who all end up with a portfolio value of $1 million at age 68. Each of them took different paths in terms of savings amounts and timing of savings, which ultimately led to meaningful differences in how much money they needed to contribute to get there. In the best case scenario, we have Walter, who started right at age 25 with $4,500 per year in savings. He was actually able to stop his savings completely at age 45 and allow compounding growth of his investment portfolio to do the rest of the work to get to that $1 million market. Um, Contrasting with Carol here, who deferred savings out to age 45, had a much more compressed timeline to get those savings in, ended up having to contribute a much higher amount on an annual basis and ultimately cumulatively much more dollars to get to that same level. So the takeaway here, obviously in the theme of financial flexibility and setting yourself up for future optionality, Walter is in a really good position to be able to redirect cash flow in those last 15 to 20 years of his working career. Now let's take a look at a different example. Here we have two investors with the same income, the same savings rate, but a different strategy. Investor one, we have that all-in retirement saver, taking advantage of the 401k, but really no strategy for savings outside of that. Investor two, we have that flexible wealth builder who has developed a diversified savings strategy across different accounts. We have baseline assumptions here that are consistent in terms of time horizon and income and annual savings and annual returns. So everything is the same. The only difference being where those investors allocate their savings. The table at the bottom shows this breakout on an annual savings basis. Investor one has $19,000 going into the 401k and $1,000 into a cash brokerage account for $20,000 total. Investor two spreads that same $20,000 across a 401k, but includes now a Roth IRA and a larger savings towards this cash taxable brokerage or after-tax investment. So let's take a look and jump ahead to age 55 to see how this plays out. Here, when we project their net worth with all of the same assumptions, we're not surprised to see that they have the same dollar amount, $1,889,000. The key difference here is how those dollars are spread. Investor one has majority of those dollars within that 401k and a smaller amount of $94,000 in the cash and taxable brokerage with nothing in a Roth. Investor two has used those diversified savings to build a diversified asset base. This comes into play as we start to explore some of the unexpected scenarios or optionality that comes into play. So on paper, the same value, but when we think about this from the lens of who has more optionality to be able to weather that unexpected expense, we start to think investor two certainly has more options to consider. It's important to note both of these investors are really in good shape to be able to handle these types of things. But when we start to look at the more tax efficient approach or the one that has more optionality, investor two really stands out in what is more accessible to them without penalties for early withdrawals, without taxable income, and without disrupting those longer term retirement dollars. So thinking of this in terms of how they got here, one investor really prioritized access and flexibility while continuing to support those long-term goals to create that more resilient profile.
Thank you, Patrick. That's great. Really highlighting there the importance of how you position your money so that it can help you during the various stages of your life and be mindful of accessing that, I think is very helpful. I want to talk a little bit here about the importance of, how do you get started on creating all of this, right? Formulating the plan and taking those action steps are key here. So as we think about improving your long-term outlook and that flexibility, I think it really starts with a level of self-reflection, right? Taking the time to explore what it is that you value, what it is that's most important to you, and think about how that could play out during the next 10 to 20 or 30 years of your working career. Think about this as from the standpoint, quite frankly, of asking yourself, if I didn't have to worry about money today, what would I do, right? Where do your passions lie? This is an important piece to then figuring out where you might want to be as you progress through your career, or how important it is for you to take on potential extra work, or I should say more hobbies or things that you enjoy, and be able to work that into your day so that that doesn't derail your ability to still accumulate the money and make the earnings that you need for your retirement. So it's really about managing that trade-off. So it starts with a level of self-assessment about what your priorities are. And then when you take and have a solid understanding with all that, you can then create your budget that factors in how can I provide for my long-term success while also factoring in that I may want to do certain other things over the next 5 or 10 or 15 years that may require financial funding. So planning a budget that doesn't necessarily just look at month to month, but also how do I accumulate and save and invest for this goal at this point and the next goal that I might have in 15 years or so on. And then think about, assess risk that might be in your future, right? We don't know exactly how things are going to play out, but we can make some educated guesses around some potential risks that could come up in our future, right? If we know that we've got mounting health issues that could cost us to have to scale back our work, or family needs, right? Families evolve. If we see a trend building where we might have to divert more of our time towards taking care of a family member, that's something that we can start thinking about and try to make steps to plan around. Things like even job instability, right? If you see trends changing in your industry, or the fact that you may need to relocate or some other change in even where you live or where your family currently resides. Also think about things from the standpoint of, can you diversify around risks or taking on too much at any given point, right? This is kind of somewhat of a simple idea, but it makes sense if you're going to say take on a larger home renovation. And you wouldn't necessarily want to do that at the same time that you're going to branch off and start your own business, right? So think about and create a timetable, if you can, of what you would like to achieve in certain time periods so that they don't overlap and create financial strain for you. And then, ask for help, right? This is something I think that many of us don't really think about as enough because we don't want to consider ourselves to be a burden towards others in our lives. But remember, you don't have to shoulder difficult times on your own. We all have colleagues and family members and people in our lives that want us to succeed and want to see us do well. So you're not alone on an island when it comes to dealing with difficult things such as financial hardships or life events. Ask those around you to be there as a supporting guide to help alleviate some of that burden when you can. And I just want to highlight really quick here, as I talked a lot about budgeting as a key for starting those savings vehicles that we really need to do. I think it's important to just kind of highlight how intentional spending really comes down to having a budget that works for you, and that you can follow, right? And that it's something that is repeatable. So I often recommend the 50-30-20 rule for budgeting. This may not be a new concept to many of you, but the simple idea is that you're going to try to allocate no more than 50% of your take-home pay towards your fixed expenses, rent or mortgage, utilities, car payment, groceries, things that are there every month. And then 30% of that net take home should go towards more discretionary spending, right? The things that you want to do in any given month. And that 20% is key here, right? Because that's the savings piece. That's the part that you immediately allocate away for the future. That should actually happen first. Put your money into savings first each month when you receive it, and then the rest you can work with as those expenses build up. But the key here is to target at least this 20%. And if you're truly trying to build out a financial resiliency and you're just getting started on accumulating this, you may consider this being a larger percentage for a period of time until you've built up a substantial emergency fund, or that I might make a change in my career or branch out and start my own business and I know I need meaningful reserves. That should be a bigger piece while you're prepping ahead of time to get to that comfortable point.
So now that we have a plan and an idea of how to get started, we want to provide some tools here that support this plan. As we've explored throughout this presentation, the concept of creating options and flexibility is an important theme. And ultimately, later in life, providing that can help prevent burnout, really, make it make you feel as though you have more control over the unexpected. So part of what we think here is it's certainly a balancing act, as Yannick just pointed out, between continuing to stay on track for your long-term goals and meeting those savings targets and making sure that those are a priority, but balancing that with making sure you have flexibility in your asset base and allocate savings to be able to be a cushion or a near-term reserve for that unexpected. We explored in case study 2 that it's not necessarily just about what you are saving, but also where you are saving and taking advantage and adapting over time to different investment and savings vehicles that are available to create that financial resilience. When it comes to the investment piece, we always want to make sure that the overall allocation and portfolio is aligned with goals. Some of those goals are going to be much longer term than others, and those investments need to be aligned to support those simultaneously. So making sure that short-term assets and potential cash needs are not exposed to risk, and also having a growth-oriented approach towards really long-term assets and in an allocation that we will stick to and always stay invested in. During the working years, it's important to understand and take advantage of the employee benefits. One example could be if you are covered by a high deductible health plan, utilizing a health savings account as a way to save on a tax preferred basis to a pool of assets that will be available for future medical expenses. This is a really great tool if you have that cash flow and availability to contribute. That creates a lot of support and flexibility down the road to cover cash flow or medical expenses without impacting your cash flows directly. And then as a portfolio and wealth evolves over time, looking at different investment opportunities that might be able to generate cash flow and income streams and on a more passive basis, structuring that as a way to help that transition from working years to wind down towards a full retirement. So the theme here, of course, is flexibility, not trying to get into a point where we have too much restriction in our plan. As a conclusion, financial resilience, creating flexibility and optionality, we think is one of the most overlooked tools for preventing burnout. It's not all about how much you're saving, although it is sometimes the hardest thing is to start somewhere and start that savings plan, then start to think about where we need to allocate those savings. The goal being that we want to create flexibility in future options and not focus so singularly on a retirement phase, acknowledging a financial lifetime has multiple phases, and we want to be prepared for those. And here at Curi Capital, Yannick and I work with many clients, to help develop and create plans, monitor and execute on those plans, adapt and adjust over time, and help us rethink and reframe what we are doing from financial planning, not just being the end result of retirement, but the entire time horizon along the way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to kind of reiterate the steps towards building out that financial resilience, again, it starts with developing a plan, stepping back, thinking about what is important to you, think about potential things that might arise in the future, whether they're things that that are higher likelihood or even things that maybe seem less likely. Think about all of them and factor that into the plan so that you have a clear kind of understanding of what might be on the forefront. And work on budgeting, right? Intentional spending and budgeting is key to the success here of being financially resilient. So creating the budget, sticking to the budget, right? Thinking about where you spend money is really going to help you be successful in this realm. Choosing the right savings vehicles, as we talked about, make sure you're allocating amongst different types of investment vehicles for the various tax benefits that you can get and easy access to funds. And, again, the power of starting early or taking steps immediately. Kicking the can down the road in this case is only going to make it more difficult for you. So if this is important, you want to jump on it right away and start taking steps so that you feel that you are moving in the right direction. And again, as Patrick said, we are here as a guide for our clients. We are here to help make sure that we are looking at this, running an analysis, sharing ideas and perspective, and making sure that clients are implementing the right savings plans so that they are successful here. And with that, we've concluded our presentation. We will take a look here to see we've got a couple of questions that we are happy to address here right now as we finish up. The first question we have is, what are the first practical steps I can take if I want to improve financial resilience without drastically changing my current lifestyle or savings rate? Patrick, if I'll try to answer that one if that's works for you here. I would say, you know, the practical steps that you can take here is really, and I completely understand, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to completely overhaul your spending, right? Or change your lifestyles drastically. But I do think that it could mean disrupting or changing that for a period of time so that you can start building that financial resiliency. So I guess what I mean by that is, think about taking a period of time where you do spend less on certain things that you've enjoyed to do and divert more of that money towards savings, right? This could be something you do over a period of months, right? Be it 3 months or up to a year or so, where you're going to divert some of your money towards building up that emergency fund, that I don't know what's going to happen fund, that, should a health issue, should a family health issue arise, and really push money into that and invest it properly, right? Let it earn and grow for you, because again, one of our biggest concerns that we all have to deal with is inflation. Inflation erodes at all of our spending power. So you have to make sure that you take this reserves and you put it into something that will grow and help offset the inflation aspect. Then once you've built that out and worked with an advisor to make sure that that is meaningful enough, you can kind of revert back towards your more comfortable spending pattern, or at least at a level where you don't feel like you're sacrificing things on a regular basis. But it really could be more of a setting a time period where you need to focus on this, but it doesn't mean you necessarily have to change your way of living permanently, right? That makes sense. Oh, one more question here that we have is, how can I tell if my financial structure is actually contributing to burnout rather than just my workload? And what adjustments would you recommend?
I can take that, Yannick. I think, at the highest level, money, finances, can be an emotional topic. I think that people approach it differently, have different feelings around it. Can lead to substantial stress. So I think what we like to how we would approach this one is acknowledge, where do you feel stresses in your life? Is it, is there debt, credit card debt? Are there things that you want to be able to spend money on that you're not able to? Do you wish you could, travel more, do things that are more on the discretionary side of your budget? And it goes back to, what are your values? What are the priorities and the goals? Sometimes we find relief in just stating our goals and understanding where we are on track for some, but maybe not on others, and putting that plan in place, to improve that outlook. It doesn't mean it has to be perfect. It just has to be something that's contributing towards those goals. And I think we need to cut ourselves some slack at times when you're in a busy career and you've got, you're juggling various things. It can be a long-term, plan here that we're trying to navigate, and acknowledging where finances and money come into play, and what you want to accomplish, and are you Are you leading to that or not? Is one way to kind of see if that's a big piece of it. And then when we think about burnout itself, and do you feel if if you're at that point, do you feel as though you can take a step back? And if you're feeling like you can't, and you really are just kind of stuck, that's where the financial aspect is likely contributing. And I would recommend, working with an advisor, someone else who has different perspective, can share some thoughts and kind of create a plan to get out of that spot.
That's great, Patrick. Thank you. Those were the questions that we had posted in there. So on that note, we will then conclude the presentation. I want to take the moment to thank everyone for joining in today. Hopefully you've got some added perspective on the topic and maybe learned something new here today. You'll see here if you our profiles are along with a QR code. If you are not currently working with a Curi advisor, please feel free to reach out to us. We welcome the opportunity to speak with you and help you plan for the many aspects of your life that we discussed here today, as well as, getting the right long-term plan in place for your portfolio and other needs as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can be of any assistance in your lives. Thank you very much, everybody.